Today, Lindsay and I were looking at this and pretty excited. All right, we're going to start with the beginning. We've named all of the eras of history. 1936, 1949, that is the beginning. The first part of the week of conference, Y.O.U conference was advertised. First part was special unity classes. So these are listed as part recreation and part meetings and classes. And our initial material, so here we have a magazine, and this is also on our history page, which is history.youalumni.com. And so we had the initial material list a lot of stuff that lived through time: the banquet, the semi-formal dance, international officers, vespers, and discussions. It was partly youth-led and partly not. So also, the clip we have, the initial age range was 12 to 30. So that was a little bit different. This is our second conference. That's a picture of the banquet. And that's 37, but anyway. And here we go, something we found out recently, that even at one of the beginning events, Charles Fillmore was listed at teaching classes at the 1941 event. So that's where we began. So it's pretty exciting stuff. All right, so the next era we are calling the post-war era.
Yeah, this is a time when we're starting to see regions develop, or regional activity among Y.O.U is starting to develop. The age range starts to move down. It's definitely moving into a more high school age. We think the concept of family groups started at this time at events, and Y.O.U had its own magazines. And it was really beginning to address some social issues that were kind of ahead of its time in a way.
Yes, you see the magazine there. All right, so this is 1960 through 89, we're calling the classic era. All right, so significant details include there was African-American integration at conference, which is the pool was integrated. You can hear this story on our YouTube, which is listed on our website. And Sheila Powell was elected the first Y.O.U African-American female president. And that was a time when the roles were really president and vice president. They're very expanded, their boardroom kind of roles. And then moving forward, this is conference 1976. If you're waiting for something to happen, you may have missed the point. That was the theme. So the conference photos, they became color after 19. And while hugging was important before, the 70s photos show touch similar to later eras. You can even see in this picture that they're all kind of holding hands. And events had themes, t-shirts, sometimes banners, and mascots, specifically this clown. Okay.
Another thing during the classic era is we started to see more regional development from the regions of unity and the Y.O.U scene. We have Jackie Green here from the Northwest, that we actually had a regional consultant role begin to happen starting in 1976. This was also when some regional kids camps began, where Y.O.Uers would lead the kids camp in the Northwest and Southwest regions. And the regional events, the rallies, start to become a really big part of the lifestyle, of the Y.O.U, that it's not just the central conference now, there's sort of some intermediary events too.
All right, so now we're moving to what we've called the international era, 1990 to 2006. Y.O.U conference is so big, it requires a quota system. There's just not enough space for everyone to go. So Shad earlier was talking about events that had 400 and 500 people. 1991 at YMCA in the Rockies had over 1,000 people. So it was so big, we had to leave the village. So that's kind of, exciting.
We also did international trips, like international teams would travel to outside the US to other areas where there were either unities or why I got to go to Mexico City on one of these trips when I was international. It was also the piece by piece program was sort of the way, the container for all of this. There was a piece by piece role and it was the piece by piece delegate role was created for international. And International Y.O.U was awarded an award from the United Nations for their peace work. And we went to the United Nations in New York to accept it.
All right, so events that had musicians and they became Y.O.U favorites: Carl Anthony, Leroy White, Mark Stanton Welsh. Y.O.Uers at the beginning of this era communicated via letters. I know that's my generation. And by the end of this, you're talking over email and then AOL instant messages. And really where we went with this is that the size of these events kind of created challenges. And now, a short interruption. From a Gallup article, U.S. church membership is down sharply in 2 decades. This article is written in 2019, and we can drop a link for you. But here's an important thing that the article states.
U.S. church membership was 70% or higher of adults going from 1937 through 1976. And it fell to 68% in the 70s through the 90s. And then the past 20 years, a full 20 percentage point decline across the US in terms of attendance. So we're going from a 70% of adults go to church to 50% or less, starting in about 99 and into 2000.
So here is a very handy graph that shows you same data. And we started our information, and so Y.O.U started 1936, so 2 years right before this. And you can even see how it comes up, and then this is the 2000s. All right, so during the time of Youth of Unity from 37 to 99, 70% of Americans attended church, 7 people out of 10. But the drop between 99 and 2019, this went from 70 to 50% of Americans, or 5 out of 10. So in 2007, we moved to the piece by piece event, which is not this was the last, 2006 was the last conference. No one knew this was going to be the last conference, and the international officers planned the event for piece by piece delegates, and it was not open to Y.O.Uers. If you want more information, this is on our website.
And so the next year, there was, in attempting to fix the issues that had come up because of size, they did an appreciative inquiry, which brought together ministers, Y.O.Uers, sponsors, in the space of a summer event. Again, they didn't displaced the summer event, and they brought people together at Unity Village, not for a conference, but for this appreciative inquiry. And while there were a lot of great ideas shared, and again, there's evidence of all this on YouTube. We've put together playlists of some of the history things, and you can see all the great intentions and great ideas. But what we know now is that there was not a lot of ownership and follow through from this time, and it wasn't open to everybody, that it was kind of a closed sort of situation. And we think that might have had an effect.
2009, it is called Y.O.U Peace Ambassador Training, just for simplicity. We're calling it Peace Ambassador Training. It was not youth-led. And while it had sections about heart coherence, it was run primarily by ministers. It was not very popular. And once again, it was not open to everyone. And because of these 3 years, this is what we're able to see. If you were a freshman the year piece by piece, you wouldn't have been able to go to that event. And so what we're able to see here is that in the span of a high school generation, we had 4 different events. Now, history tells us that Y.O.U is the event that is the next, generation. However, we did not know this when this happened. So if you were new to Y.O.U, you wouldn't have known. So because of the disruption of events, it created an entire high school generation that did not have the same consistency that the 7 years before it had. So when we talk about why did this happen, we believe this is a 70-year pattern disruption at the same time as a 20-point drop in church attendance. And so we call this period the breakdown. And you can see this is the last conference photo in 2006. And this is the first Y.O.U photo in 2010. the attendance is considerably less. And that brings us to the era of 2010 to 2019, which we're calling Y.O.U. This is a rebuilding after a breakdown period. Thank you, Shad. And Y.O.U did not have the same numbers as conference because now it's a whole new thing. You know, this is also the first generation. I brought this up because I was a consultant in 2010. My Y.O.Uers always knew the 5 unity principles, but it was marketed. It was not a part of the general, while we always had principles, it's not marketed in that same way. Internationals are now indies and they're chosen by region. Some other important details of this era include
that people can meet through the internet, that whereas previous, in order to see your friends in the past, you actually had to go to an event. Well, now you can Skype or FaceTime in between your events. You can do, you can make videos and share your experiences with people and, could lead to more engagement as well. And then, social media accounts started and then when handoffs to the next generation, maybe someone doesn't keep up the social media accounts. And it's a new era of trying to keep up communication and trying to show up where people are.
All right. So 2020 to the present, we're calling it Covid+IY. Mostly because you can't really talk about a generation, but we had Zoom during Y.O.U during 2020 and then Zoom fatigue during 2021. We've seen rebuilding of regions and Y.O.U and events are coming back in person. So, and there's a lot of good things happening in the chat. So I want to honor all that, but this is, I believe, the end of our history section. It's been that's our journey here. This is the first time we had presented. I have to say, it's a little bit more emotional than I thought it would be. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think until we put this together, that we realized how much we had learned and how much we knew about Y.O.U and the history of it. And it's really, I don't know, it's enriched my sort of experience now, knowing that I'm a part of something that has that storied history and how many people it's touched. And I think personally that this history piece is a really important part of how we get new families to care about unity and new parents to care about or not new parents, but parents of kids, bringing them to Uniteens and trying to be involved in something that has such a strong legacy. I think that the calling on this history part can really motivate people to participate.
Ed.
Yeah, I just want to bring up that I see Y.O.U as the culmination of the Unity Youth Ed experience. And it's something that we really need to put some energy and some resources behind, because it's the end point of the kind of the schooling process for our youth ed. And I think it's something that we're really lacking as a focus area from many of the ministries. Thanks.
I agree that there's really something powerful about a program that creates an experience like Y.O.U. And it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, as much as, I put Y.O.U on a pedestal, it does exist in concert with Uniteens, in concert with a younger program, with a larger ministry. And so, yeah, telling that whole story, I think, is pretty important.